Let's kick off the week with the macro and top market themes. And Pete McGuire from XM is joining us live on the program in studio. Morning, Pete.
Good morning, Daniel.
Thanks for coming into the studio.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. I tell you what, it's a wet and wild day in Barangaroo.
It is. Well, it's a wet and wild day if we're going to look ahead at what's going to happen nationally in the markets. There's a lot of caution across the weekend. How do you see it starting out?
Well, there is a lot of caution, and we're not sure how the FOMC plays. We're sure of one thing, and that's Jerome Powell, the Fed chair's statements. He's not even thinking about raising rates. So their guidance and where that rolls this week is going to be interesting. We saw that sell-off on Saturday morning on New York. We saw the US dollar really under pressure. It's come, 94.3, 94.4. It's been smashed to the downside, and it's taken a couple of those other markets well and truly up to gold at record territory.
Gold, that is what you just mentioned, record territory. Just how much further can it go? Because we're hearing a lot of forecasts for 2000s. There's a lot of gold bugs out there, though.
There are a lot of gold bugs, but when you think about the big story, we understand kicking the can down the road, Corona, all of those impacts. You also the geopolitical tensions with the election in China. So it's really producing, I think, and brewing a perfect storm for gold. So 2000, why can't it? It's only $75. I was $19.25. I said to Daniel when I came in, $19.25. It's back at $19.10.
Yep.
It's a bit of profits, taking over the first hour of trade. But I think that momentum is certainly onward and upward. One thing that I'm really looking at is that euro strength. It's been extraordinary since early May.
Yep.
108 against the dollar. Now it's at 116.50. So it's been very, very strongly bid up, that euro. Dollar come off. And I think King Dollar's really taking a bit of a whack to the chops at the moment.
Well, I guess it all kicks off with this parlay with the Republicans, just to see what kind of stimulus they're going to set the agenda for in the US. That should come out in a matter of hours. So we really will probably see a bit of a boost to some of these commodities. The bigger the stimulus, the bigger the push to the $9.
Well, they've got to get it through Congress as well, and that's the other side. But yes, that momentum push, I think... answering Ingrid's question, certainly 2000 is achievable. It may get there even by September. I think there's just that undercurrent of uncertainty and stimulus-led Eurozone strengthening. But we've got those GDP numbers coming out this week with Euro and Eurozone and US, which are going to be harrowing. We say they're going to be the worst on record. So that's for that second quarter.
We already know this, though. Is that
we do.
In terms of how that impacts markets? Just give us an idea.
I think it's baked in to some extent, but I think that realisation and those overarching themes could really push that equity market down a little bit further. Are we in a little bit of a breather, a little bit, are we relying too much really on stimulus to take us forward for those equity markets? And maybe that's the case.
Is there a chance some of that momentum from those exuberant retail investors, let's call them, is there a chance that they're not fully baking in some of the realities, that they're just looking at markets ticking upwards, and then when these numbers hit, they'll show the same amount of fear to the downside?
Well, I think that the retail investor has got one thing on their hands, a lot of them have been able to educate themselves over the last few months. And that really comes down to taking on board information. So they may be just as quickly and nimble to actually sell positions or hedge their positions, because we're very sure of that they hedge their positions with different derivatives and so on to look at any downward pressure. So they may be far quicker this time to exit a market, and realise that there's other opportunities out there.
What are you watching catalyst-wise? I know we're talking about the Fed, we're talking about economic data. In terms of all that, can you put all that aside and just
US
say
dollar?
And just say, well, US dollar is going to continue to weaken, markets are going to continue to strengthen. Is that
I'm just looking at US dollar because King dollar is it's being savaged. We saw 101.
But deservedly so?
Deservedly so, but yes, I'm not sure how much lower it can go. Do we see a 90 handle? It's 94 and a bit at the moment. That it seems to be downdraft pushing it lower, and that really pushes that gold price. So I think that whilst the bugs are out there saying, gold, they're all really saying US dollar softness. So that guidance from the Fed this week, where does Jerome Powell sit on all this? And I think that's what keeps me up at night, watching the TV at 3 o'clock in the morning. What's Powell saying on Capitol Hill? What's he saying? And where's Trump play on all of this?
Does it make a difference though what Powell's saying? Because we know that the Fed's going to continue with what they're doing. We know that stimulus will continue. Is it just that you're looking for any signal that perhaps that will taper off a bit? Not necessarily taper, but just, I guess, flatten?
Well, flatten the theme. We all understand that it's going to be kicked on, and we think interest rates are low for many years to come. But what an analyst looks at and what market traders look at, what are they saying right now? And what can happen to a market? Can all of a sudden gold gets $30 wiped off it? What happened? Well, you're looking at what the sentiment was. What was the comment? If you look closely enough, and that's the education standpoint, if you critically analyse markets, and that's what traders do, many are glued in front of screens for 12 and 15 hours a day looking at information. So they see the technicals, they see the seasonality, but they also have an ear out. What are they saying? What's Chairman Powell saying? What are the overarching themes? And that seems to be, I think, the momentum side of it as far as traders.
But is that the thing? Is that the headlines now that are really starting to move markets in these one direction or another? There's just so much data out there, so many conflicting opinions. Is it the headline that really is the draw card now?
I think the headline to some extent, because there's a sense of nervousness. Is that euphoria? I think it's been stripped out a little bit. I don't think it's boiling away, with the kettle, whistling away on the stove. I think some of that steam's come out and dissipated, and how August plays could be a very different month to how May and June played. It can't continue to this, massive upside swings. Have a look at earnings. I look at all of those points, and then, you've got teams of analysts reviewing numbers and taking on board critical information, and I think that's where traders look for opportunity. I don't think people are in there for long term. I think they trade markets a little bit like how they look at, events. And I think that they've got that capacity to exit a market, don't marry a trade, in other words.
What about oil? Talk us through oil prices, because we haven't really talked about that today.
$42, $43, $44. I'm worried about the Libya situation as far as the tribes over there and the Turkey and Egypt. Geopolitically, I feel as though that theme could really escalate, certainly in the summer. It gets a bit hot over there, about 50 odd degrees in the desert heat. And I feel as though that could be the catalyst to really drive change and sentiment to the market. Demand destruction. When do airlines start to fly?
Yep.
When do we see second waves? Europe seems to be coming out. US seems to be getting worse. So and what's happening here? So that theme as far as unlocking, and that really impacts oil.
This is the key, right? Because even though we don't have official lockdowns across the globe, you've just seen the UK bring in more restrictions for Spain. So flights are being cut, quarantining's been
you go to Spain for the summer and you come back and you've got to lock yourself up.
Now for 2 weeks. And, so
and pay yourself.
Exactly. So the question here is, yes, there's no official lockdowns, but people aren't flying. People aren't living a normal life just because the economy is open.
Well, it might be, if you live in France and you jump in the car and shoot down to Spain, it might be a different matter. But, Australia's a different mindset. We're in a continent and we're a long way from anywhere. So that's the realisation, and you're going, you have to foot the bill yourself when you fly in versus government saying go and stay in the 5-star. Now you're saying, well, righto, I've got to isolate, plus the other side, loss of earnings and so on. So, I think that there's a general theme of nervousness, and how long does this last really creates fear into the market, which again pushes gold higher.
When we look locally, the last time we spoke to you, we hadn't heard from our own government, our own mini budget plans, if you will. What was your takeaway from the second round of stimulus that we're expecting to see here shortly?
I look, just one thing, employment, and I feel as though, Frydenberg and Morrison have got their hands pretty centred on the wheel, and they realise how dire the situation is. Youth unemployment, how do you keep stimulus? How do the JobKeeper, JobSeeker, all of those initiatives? How do they wash through the market, and where are we at Christmas? Because that's the theme. I look at it's okay being in July, but what's the longer term vision going to be? Are we going to see employment? Are we seeing crated workforces? Have the youth? They just don't have jobs to go to. So that leads to crime. That leads to civil unrest. They know what's going on.
So Peter, Dr. Copper, how does that perform in this sort of environment?
It's been not bad bid up over the last matter of a week or two. It's been pretty good. Global demand has been strong. Is that going to remain? I think Chinese demand. So all of those factors have been very supportive for base metals. So it's China
mainly driving?
I think it's pretty much China, because they have stimulus, and naturally their recovery mechanism is far greater and quicker than anyone else. And it's been very, very strongly bid. All of those base metals have done very well over the short run. Are they going to continue? Comes down to demand.
Does their recovery get hit by the political unrest between the US and China, or does it just become a bit of a reallocation of where trades go? Does their entire economy get compromised if this escalates?
I think it does, and you're seeing that sell-off we saw 3.5% to nearly 4% down wash out of Chinese markets, equity markets on Friday. That question is interesting. You're now 95 days from an election. This is US election. If Trump's going to do something, I mean, I read the papers this morning. You see Biden's that far in front, he can't even hear the music. So everything's solid. He's just staying in his basement, talking, not even coming out, wearing a mask, and everyone's just going on the Biden show. So first off, if Trump's going to act, he needs to act pretty much today. It's no good acting in 2 months' time. The whole framework has changed, and I feel as though that mechanism is gaining strength. If I listen to the likes of Navarro, listen to the likes certainly of Steve Bannon, have a look Larry Kudlow, listen to the big decision makers, Pompeo, Mnuchin to a lesser degree, they're really pushing for that Chinese geopolitical issues. They're looking at the South China Sea. So all of those hotspots are creating tensions, and I think that will be ramped up over the weeks ahead. I might be totally wrong, and Biden just rolls in and Trump just, takes it on the chin, but I really don't think he's that sort of fellow.
Definitely not.
And of course, we know that the polls have been wrong so many times.
So many times.
Look what happened with Brexit.
Look at that, Dukakis.
When Trump originally got in.
Yeah, Dukakis in '88, they say he was that far in front. It was ridiculous. Bush just, steamrolled. Yeah. So this time it's different. Reagan is you put your mind back to really '84, and they're saying that Trump may pull it out of the bag. You can never write him off.
Yeah. Well, let's wait and see what happens.
Yeah,
absolutely.
See how markets respond. Peter McGuire, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel.